Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome to Higher Awards Speaker Series. And during this speaker series, we get to know the stories of religious and nonprofit leaders and the work of their organizations. Before beginning our conversation today, we just want to briefly introduce Higher Awards and our guest speaker's background. Higher Awards is a startup based in Silicon Valley that gives community-focused organizations the ability to provide members with a credit card that is branded with the organization's logo. Essentially, each time the members use the card, they support the organization financially because 2% of the members' daily transactions goes directly towards the organization. My name is Shri, and I'm a business intern for Higher Awards this summer.
My name is Mihir Nair, and I'm also a business intern with Higher Awards this summer. Along with Shri, will be co-host for this conversation. Last but not least, we'd love to extend a warm welcome to today's guest speaker, Eryn Yuen. Ms. Yuen, she is the co-director of operations at Presence Fellowship. I'll just call her Eryn because she's our age. And this Presence Fellowship is a UC Berkeley College Christian Fellowship.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Welcome, Eryn. And just to start off, here at Higher Awards, we're all about sharing the stories of those who already dedicate their lives to other people. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you work to empower and uplift others as the co-director of operations at Presence Fellowship?
Yeah, so I feel like my position started before I took on an actual title. When you're serving in a religious capacity, or especially in a Christian context, you have to have a mindset of, we call it like a heart of a servant. And so when we serve, we try to expect nothing in return. Obviously, it is really difficult because our instinct is to kind of ask or constantly question, like, why am I giving all of myself with nothing being given back to me? And I think we have to realize that we have to acknowledge like what we're giving up, right? So emotional energy counts, physical energy counts, all these things that maybe we don't log like through money or through or energy points, I suppose. It all is expenditure. And so when we give without expectation, you tend to, oh God, sorry. If everybody is kind of just expecting to receive, you create a culture of like consumerism, right? And so everybody's kind of sitting there being like, why am I not receiving enough? Why are people not reaching out to me? Why is everybody kind of just focused on themselves and nobody is able to put the first step forward? But when people see that other people are giving, they are more willing to invest in the community as well, right? And so for me personally, I realized that oftentimes I would have to be the one to support first or to give first. And realizing that it's not always going to come back in that equal capacity back to me. In doing so, we all have to acknowledge that it is for the greater good of the community, and when you are willing to give first, it'll come back, but not necessarily to you directly. You'll see it in the fruit of the community. Like you'll see it foster and grow within each other. And that community will grow stronger even if you're not receiving that currency necessarily back to you. And so my mindset in serving this community has always been give first, but at the same time, you have to start with a foundation of humility, essentially, because if you don't, you start to build a self-righteousness that, oh, I'm constantly the one giving, and oh, I'm so much better than everyone else because I'm giving without expectation, and therefore I am doing more than everybody else. And you can get to a place where you're not willing to receive because you put so much value in this position of I'm the giver, and so I don't want anybody to kind of break that by allowing myself to receive as well. And so there's this weird balance that we have to have of being able to be humble enough to receive, but also to have the heart to give without any desire or expectation to see it come back to you. Yeah, So those, I guess, are kind of the core foundations of what I try to hold on to in my position of serving. Oftentimes you can look at these directors or higher position and be like, wow, they have so much clout or they have so much status. But I think the core tenet of serving in this community specifically that has been different than all the other communities I've served in is you really have to place yourself below the people you are serving. Your status is not above them because you are the director or have some title. You are kind of the footstool of the organization.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important to recognize our own privilege and our own, the way that our outlook is shaped by our past experiences. And I think it's really admirable that as a director, you have taken the leadership to give back to others first and foremost. You mentioned how you have been in scenarios in life where you have to give back, and it's not like you do it because you are the leader, you just do it to step up and make sure that others around you also follow in suit, and that you've built this great community. But regardless, whenever you're serving others, that status doesn't matter. You have to give as a community, um, and giving is that community-driven activity that's super critical to fostering, better relationships with others. So thank you for sharing that. And just touching on the fact that you are this director, how has your leadership experience been shaped by the current circumstances due to COVID-19? And to that end, I guess, how is your fellowship at UC Berkeley still fostering that sense of inclusivity and community despite these challenging circumstances?
For sure. One of the things I think me and my co do well is putting ourselves in the shoes of those who are general members who may not be in a serving capacity. I think it's easy when you are serving and investing so much in a community to have that same expectation that your community members will be willing to put in the time or the effort into your community that is equal to what you're giving. Because I'm putting so much time into this, why can't you at least just show up, But we can't have that expectation that the members are as bought into the community as we are because we stepped into this position, right? And so we try to be open-hearted and allow ourselves to put ourselves in their shoes and know if I were a general member and I wasn't seeing all the behind the scenes work and understanding how much is going into this, because it's not like broadcasted, right? Like you see a newsletter email, but you don't know like that took 2 hours from someone's time to put that out there. You just read the email in 5 minutes and you're like, okay, cool. Or maybe even 5 seconds. So to understand that all this work, that's background work that we do, not everybody's going to see it and be okay with that. And those who want to receive will come out, and we just have to do our best to encourage people to come out. And because I think obviously we have to be aware of Zoom fatigue. That is something new that we have to deal with because of the coronavirus situation, being aware of all these different small things that may cause someone to try to kind of check out, but being able to pull them back in, because if someone checks out and then they start going in the cycle of loneliness and like thinking they have no community and it's like, why is nobody reaching out to me? We kind of have to extend that hand first to pull them back in. And so I guess in that sense, leadership has become much more proactive. We can't kind of expect ourselves to just look at a body and see what they need. We have to think ahead to understand what the needs of the people are by asking and by reaching out first, because people aren't necessarily going to show signs like online or something that they need something from the community. In that sense, leadership has become pretty different. I guess our expectations of what leadership looked like when we first signed up for this position has obviously had to evolve pretty significantly. And so it's a lot of adjustment and flexibility, and knowing that maybe not all of the things that we hope to accomplish in this coming year are going to be able to happen. Maybe the dreams that we had for our community and the vision that we had originally are going to have to be put aside for the more immediate needs of our community. And to kind of like be like, it's not what I want to see in my leadership sign. It's not going to be like the legacy I wanted to leave in the year that I have. It's going to have to be accommodating the people who I'm serving and knowing what they need first and foremost instead of what I wanted to see happen. I think that's been the biggest shift.
Yeah, thank you so much for like sharing that. I think like even as like college students ourselves and like people who are also involved in like that community, like you were saying, leadership has like shifted to a more proactive approach. And you have to continue to like do the work as a leader and be proactive about your work by kind of like reaching out first and like constantly asking like what other people need. But I think like as you were saying, I think it's also okay to understand that like it's about like receiving as well. And like not everyone is like super obvious about what they need, and like not everyone is like receptive, especially during like these difficult times. Yeah, and like just going off of that, when I was like looking at like your fellowship, what I noticed was like one of the strongest like core values that the Living Water Church also, which is like associated with your fellowship, which is like reaffirms like time and time again, is the commitment to inclusion and the commitment to being like a multicultural and multi-generational safe space for everybody. And it like strives to create a equitable and inclusive community. Can you elaborate more on why you personally believe that faith-based organizations and like churches and like your fellowship, and why must they like bring about more equity and inclusion of everyone? And like how are you kind of like working to do that as well?
Yeah, so if you look historically at Christianity, it was revolutionary for its time in that it claimed that the church would have to be made up of every tribe, tongue, and nation. For that time, that was a radical claim. So built into the very foundation of our beliefs is that we would have to have diversity in the church, and it wasn't going to be for one specific ethnic group or one specific culture. It was to be made up of like every type of person in the world. And so from that, I think you also have the facet of if you claim to have the truth, you have to allow people the space to question it. Um, and so if you stand on this claim that Christianity is true, then you have to be able to allow people to challenge it and be able to come to that conclusion that it is true for themselves. People aren't going to believe something just because you tell them to, or at least they shouldn't. Maybe I guess in today's climate, you can see that many people are believing things just because somebody tells it to them. But in order for it to be life-changing and genuine, you have to be allowed to reach that conclusion on your own. And in that, if as a church, your job should be to allow people to reach this conclusion on their own without feeling pressured. Obviously, be encouraging and be loving and supportive in their walk. Something we've seen recently is a lot of people who have been questioning have come through and been able to explore it on their own and then reach the conclusion of whether or not they believed it was true in the end for themselves without feeling rushed or without feeling like people were just trying to shove it down their throats. I think Living Water in specific does a really good job at not being too pushy and but also balancing that out with being welcoming and loving as a community. I'm honestly not going to stand here and say that we do the best at diversity. I definitely think there are some structural things that need to be improved in coming years if we are to claim that, or as in order to build upon the claim that we really do value diversity. I believe we do value it. I don't know if we do the best at proactively promoting it. And I think there are a few things that can go into that. You can think of how difficult it might be for an individual to walk into a space and not see too many people like them. And so in order to begin to break those barriers of having a one a fellowship that has people of like one color or kind of all look the same or have grown up the same way, to be able to break that will take a lot of time and a lot of intentionality from everybody in the community, not just the leadership. And so everybody will have to have this heart to want to change that in order for it to really be broken down and make it happen. But I do believe that anybody who does step foot into Presence and Living Water will be welcomed with open arms. And I hope that the community will continue to support that and will move towards this desire to see real integration and um, unification, I guess, of all the kinds of people that are represented in Berkeley.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really inspiring to hear from, as you are the co-director of a fellowship group on the campus of a pretty big university, you recognize that while you say you're open, you definitely have work to do, and you're being very open and honest about the fact that just because there's certain people of one color doesn't mean that your fellowship group is just excluded to that type of a person. It's open to everyone, and it's great to hear that you want to be more proactive about it. And I think honestly, just taking some time for all of us to reflect in these difficult times about how we can be better about that, and thinking about that, and yeah, just being very introspective. I think it's really important. So thank you for being so honest about that. And just going off of the fact that you're talking about how you want to build a more inclusive and diverse community, here at Higher Awards, we are all about empowering the local community, and specifically our financial services financially empower the community, because 2% of daily transactions with our services goes back to a religious or nonprofit org. So just speaking on this, with all the growth that's happening with the Living Water Church, because they've grown their impact in the past to go just beyond their local community, and they've grown to these fellowships. So what do you see as the co-director of operations at the President's Fellowship? How do you see some of the financial challenges manifesting themselves in the future? And how do you plan to overcome these challenges as well?
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's difficult, especially since we are a college fellowship, because as we all know, college students are quite poor. Um, we don't have as many resources as some of the other maybe churches on campus or maybe organizations on campus. We don't receive ASUC funding. We do pretty much rely very heavily on a tithe and donation-based system. Something that really impacted me as a freshman was seeing how generous the upperclassmen were to us. And so even if they didn't have that much money, they would continuously remind us and pour out on us very generously, whether that was like through buying us food or through helping us do activities, or even if it's just with time, it doesn't even necessarily have to be with money. They gave us so much of their time and their energy while they were like busy and obviously had studies and many other organizations to pay attention to, but they consistently reminded us that they were doing this not because they had to, but because they loved us. And I think that really showed me what it looked like to live generously. So they reminded us like it wasn't that we were expected to do the same, but that they hoped that in showing us that we were loved, we would love on the next generation below us. And so it's very interesting. My co and I have talked a lot about this semester on fighting this consumeristic mindset of how a lot of people come into an organization, sit there and ask like, what can I receive from this organization? How can I benefit? Like what can I take from this experience? But we want to build a culture where it's what can I give to this community? How can I feed it? How can I allow it to grow? Not just what can I take from it. And so whether that's financially, whether that's with time, with energy, with emotions, that'll all hopefully be shown. First, from the leadership, I do think we have to lead by example, but yeah, that we would become a group of students that would feed one another. Maybe not practically, I guess, right now because of COVID, we can't necessarily cook for one another. I guess we could Uber Eats and deliver or something, but yeah, that we would become a group that truly is generous with one another, and that we don't sit here and ask, what can I take from this group? Because that will run any group dry. If you have everybody sitting there saying, like, what can I take? Nothing's going to be given, and you're going to have nothing left. But if everybody has the mindset of how can I serve one another? How can I contribute? Then you will have, your cup will runneth over, I guess you could say. You will have resources for days.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, and thank you for joining this conversation today, Eryn. We really appreciate the fact that just in your last response, you really touched on the fact that it may not be financial resources, but in the future, just coming together, investing yourself, investing your time, investing your money, putting yourself, all into a cause is super important. Sharing food, being benevolent, sharing compassion and humility with one another and uplifting each other is really what you're all about, and it's also what we're all about. So thank you for coming on. We definitely hope each and every one of you has learned more about the work of the UC Berkeley President's Fellowship and the Living Water Church. Finally, we want to thank everyone for tuning in. You can follow the inspiring work of Living Water Church at lw.church/. Finally, Higher Words is all about sharing stories and empowering local communities and individuals who have already been dedicating their lives to others, such as Eryn. If you wish to learn more about Higher Words and the way that we financially empower community-focused organizations, please visit higherwards.com or follow us at Higher Words on our social media accounts. For now, we hope you all are staying safe and healthy, and we hope to see you again for another installment of our speaker series. Bye.